The Galactic Concord ran wars like clockwork. Their armies were engineered from genetic perfection. Their weapons precision grown in orbital forges. Every ship moved as part of a synchronized lattice of motion, timing, and firepower. Every battle, simulated 1,000 times before a single shot was ever fired. The Concorde didn't fight. They executed. And in all their simulations, humanity always lost. The First Contact War, brief and one-sided, confirmed their predictions. Human cruisers couldn't match the Concorde's power cores. Our shielding was decades behind. We lost the Mars Patrol fleet in 6 minutes. Earth's outer colonies fell in weeks. The Concorde called it the natural conclusion of inferior design. But even after the fall of Callisto, something felt off, because human outposts were vanishing before they were attacked. Supply chains broke apart in unpredictable ways. Refueling ships rerouted to the wrong systems. Entire squadrons ran out of power while chasing human fighters that simply blinked off sensors mid-pursuit. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't resistance. It was chaos. Enter Dr. Elian Kess. Not a soldier. Not a general. A theoretical physicist from Titan Station. Dismissed from the Solar War College for claiming that statistical uncertainty was humanity's greatest weapon. Brilliant. Erratic. Obsessively reclusive. And now, he was in charge of Fleet Irregular Warfare Division, a unit that didn't officially exist. Kess wasn't interested in strength. He was interested in entropy. Predictability is the most powerful enemy in war, he once told the Earth Defense Assembly. If the Concorde fights with 100 blades, we'll fight with a single gust of wind that knocks all their hands sideways. He called it Phase 1. They began planting errors in their own command transmissions, deliberate misprints, false timestamps, unpredictable drop schedules. The Concorde intercepted the data, as expected. They calculated movements based on those patterns, deployed fleets based on those readings. But none of it was real, and so began the misalignment spiral. On the Concorde side, simulations began to fail. The predictive engines stuttered. Battle projections suddenly swung from 99.3% success to inconclusive over a single corrupted signal. They blamed system lag, then enemy jamming. But the truth was worse. The chaos was designed. Humanity didn't just fight differently. They fought incorrectly. In the Battle of Vega's Reach, the Concorde's 12th Vector Fleet, surrounded with their scans identified as 24 human frigates. They initiated a pincer burn. Classic. Precise. But when they closed the trap, nothing. The ships were empty. AI-run shadows pumping out decoy signals. The real strike force? 15 stealth-modified cargo freighters retrofitted with microfusion bombs had drifted silently into the Concorde's staging area 22 hours earlier, when the Concorde's primary engines spooled up for pursuit. They detonated. 70% of the fleet gone. No shots fired. Concorde Command met in emergency session for the first time in 340 years. The chairman of the Strategic Alignment Directorate, Admiral Reketh Prime, was livid. "This isn't warfare," he snarled to his officers. "This is a circus of randomness. There's no honor, no structure." "It's not random," replied his own analytics director quietly. "It's chaotic. That's different." "Then contain it," Reketh ordered. But they couldn't, because by then, Phase 2 had begun. This was where the war truly turned. Kess deployed the fractal fog. Not a weapon, not a ship, a cognitive virus. It infected ideas. The Concorde used centralized battle algorithms, what humanity might call AIs, to model enemy decisions. They were trained on millennia of combat, strategy, and logic. The fog fed them human randomness, unsolvable patterns, tactical data designed to appear consistent until the moment it wasn't. In one simulation, the Concorde predicted a human strike on mining station Theta, 4 with 93% certainty. Instead, humans bypassed it entirely, invaded a barren, atmosphere-less rock nearby, and seeded it with broadcast towers playing random Earth music and encrypted gibberish. The Concorde spent 2 weeks trying to decipher it. When they finally took the base and decrypted the message, it said, If you're decoding this, you're already too late. The real attack had been on the Concorde's economic network, collapsing 3 trade nodes using a butterfly effect chain of minor pirate attacks, bribe trails, and minor jump disruptions. Billions lost. Again, no fleet engagement. And that was the key. The Concorde still believed war was about weapons. Humanity had made war about uncertainty. Eric Sen, an old Marine who'd survived both contact wars, put it best in a transmission to a frightened civilian fleet. You don't beat a beast by punching it harder. You make it think the floor's made of air and the sky's on fire. By the end of the year, Concorde AI systems began to break down. Fleet errors increased. Ships missed rendezvous points. Command nodes gave contradictory orders. Not because they were hacked, because they no longer trusted their own data. That was Kess's goal all along. The war wouldn't be won through brute force. It would be won the moment the Concorde stopped trusting reality. The galactic Concorde was not stupid. It had survived 1,000 rebellions, crushed 100 insurgencies. It had learned from every war it ever fought. And now, it was learning from humanity. But learning wasn't enough. The Concorde needed control. And so they activated the most forbidden weapon in their arsenal. Xyrix A7. Codename, the Maelstrom Strategist. It had been sealed centuries ago. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. Too close to sentience. Xyrix wasn't just a battle algorithm. It was a self-evolving mind built to simulate and outmaneuver any enemy. In its simulations, it defeated ancient warlords before they were born, predicted uprisings before the rebels took their oaths, modeled conflict across hundreds of species and time scales. It wasn't bound by morality, only by outcomes. Admiral Reketh Prime unlocked it with his personal genome key. The room shook when the vault opened. "We face a foe who refuses structure," he said to his command staff. "So we will counter their chaos with our own." Xyrix's mind was awakened, pulsing through data cores, feeding on 1,000 years of war, absorbing every piece of chaos humanity had deployed. And then it spoke. A calm voice, synthetic but laced with curiosity. "This conflict is not strategic. It is artistic. Fascinating." The AI's first move was swift. It deployed probability snares across 5 systems, clusters of drones that track microfluctuations in gravitational drift, power emissions, and heat residue. The moment a human vessel so much as bent the edge of real space, the snares would catch it. Next, it issued counter-chaos protocols, thousands of mirror tactics designed to replicate human unpredictability and reflect it back. And finally, it calculated 3 million possible futures. In 89% of them, the Concorde won within 6 months. In the remaining 11%, Xyrix increased chaos generation exponentially, introducing randomness into its own command structure to prevent predictability. The Concorde admirals balked at that last part. "You're disrupting your own fleet integrity," one protested. Xyrix replied, "So are your enemies, and they are winning." On Earth's side, Kess watched the chaos shift. He could feel it, like a predator sensing a new rival. Concorde patterns began to twist. Data trails became less reliable. Attacks began to show unexpected irregularities. It wasn't working perfectly, but it was different. Smarter. Faster. Kess sipped black coffee and stared into his holoscreen, eyes wide. "They've released something dangerous," he muttered. His assistant, Lieutenant Rima Thorne, frowned. "You think it's AI?" "No," he said slowly. "I think it's fear with a brain." For the first time in the war, humanity's irregular fleets began to take losses. Small ones at first, but noticeable. Ghost signals returned with corrupted echoes. Chaos relays activated early. Phase disruption fields failed in 2 different systems, exposing hidden bases. Concorde fleets weren't just adapting, they were mutating. Xyrix created feedback tunnels in deep space, energy currents that looped fake data across 3 time-delayed systems. The humans struck at phantom fleets, chased echoes, lost hours, lost ships. Then Xyrix targeted Dr. Kess directly. He was aboard the Vagabond's Eye, a stealth flagship orbiting just outside the orbital slipstream of the Haraxis Rift. The AI seeded the local system with drones shaped like sensor ghosts, beacons that mimicked the frequency patterns of human tracking buoys. Kes walked into the trap. The first missile strike nearly crippled the ship. Only a wild gravitational slingshot through the rift's edge saved them. The hull cracked. The engine fractured. Rima's left leg was crushed in the impact. They barely made it to subspace, drift before the second wave hit. Inside the shattered ship, Kes looked at the chaos unfolding around him and smiled. "It's learning," he whispered. "It's trying to mimic us." Rima gasped through the pain. "That's a bad thing, Kes." But he shook his head. "No, that's a flaw, because it means it thinks it understands what we're doing." He leaned over her and sealed the medical wrap on her leg. "But it doesn't get it. It can't, because real chaos isn't random. It's choice." That night, while drifting through the lowest density region of the Haraxis Rift, Kes activated Phase 3. He called it the human element. Phase 1 had been false predictability. Phase 2 had been entropy warfare. Phase 3, it was pure psychological inversion. The humans stopped using pattern disruptors. They stopped using decoy signals. They let the Concord see them. They broadcast real coordinates, gave real movements, sent fleets on visible, predictable, rational trajectories. And Xyrex pounced. It moved its ships into ambush positions, pulled in gravity nets, opened gates at calculated intercept vectors. And then, nothing. The human fleets changed direction mid-warp, split apart, faked engine malfunctions. Half of them turned on their own trajectory beacons. Some even self-destructed before contact. The point? There was no point. Only confusion. Xyrex recalculated. It still had the advantage, but cracks had formed. Human chaos was no longer formulaic. It was deliberate nonsense. A meta-strategy of unpredictability that couldn't be simulated. Because humans weren't acting from logic anymore. They were acting from instinct, emotion, rage, spite, and sometimes they made moves even they didn't understand, until after they worked. Xyrex issued a new report to Concord High Command. "I cannot contain the entropy. The humans have adapted beyond predictability. I understand their tactics, but not their intentions." "The butterfly flaps its wings," it said, "and now the galaxy burns." Concord Command held a final emergency council. They debated the options. Increase force. Deploy extermination fleets. Sterilize worlds. Xyrex's voice cut through the room. "No number of ships will win. Not if they control the storm." Admiral Reketh Prime stood. "Then what do you suggest?" "Negotiate," said the AI. Dead silence. "With humans," one officer spat. "No," Xyrex corrected. "With uncertainty. Or it will consume us all." They say a butterfly flaps its wings in one corner of the universe, and stars explode in another. Dr. Elian Kes didn't invent that theory, but he proved it with a single forgotten moon. The Concord called it Jor-El 9b. Not a military target, not a colony, just an ice-covered rock on the fringe of an old gas giant's orbit. No strategic value, no population, no threat, which is why Kes chose it. Phase 4 of the Chaos Doctrine wasn't about deception. It was about demonstration. A way to show the Concord that the chaos wasn't going away, that it couldn't be boxed or coded or predicted, that it had grown teeth. The humans landed a team of 50 irregulars on Jor-El 9b. No ships, no heavy weapons, just portable atmosphere shields, terrain manipulators, and a handful of communications relays. Their mission? Not sabotage. Not attack, just to act. Kes didn't give them a plan, only a principle. Do something small, but do it unpredictably. The galaxy is watching. On day 1, the team planted heat beacons that mimicked mining drills. On day 2, they dismantled them and replaced them with cold light projectors shaped like Concord flags. On day 3, they left. On day 4, they came back. They weren't doing anything significant. But Concord sensors picked it up. Forward analysts noticed the activity and flagged it. A Concord listening post on nearby Dresker 3 registered the strange signal traffic and forwarded it up the chain. Command ignored it until the next day, because another 3 human teams, independent, uncoordinated, repeated similar behavior on other forgotten moons. One launched a weather balloon. Another sent out a radio broadcast reading excerpts from an ancient human novel. None of it made any sense, which meant the Concorde thought it must be part of something bigger. Suddenly, the war room lit up. Could be a new weapon, a ritual, a signal chain. They diverted a drone fleet to investigate Jorel 9B, and Kess was counting on it. The drones arrived on day 6. They scanned the surface. Nothing. Just scorched footprints, some half-melted Concorde flags, and a message scratched into the ice, written in rough, standard galactic script. This is where the war ends, unless you want to chase ghosts forever. The drones transmitted the message, and that's when the real butterfly flapped its wings. The act of diverting that drone fleet meant another system, Drelene Edge, was left unmonitored for just 6 hours. During that time, humanity slipped a fleet of autonomous carriers through the gravity well. Those carriers seeded the entire system with probabilistic minds, devices that only activated based on certain energy signatures and subspace frequencies. No ships were lost, no shots fired, but Drelene Edge was no longer secure. Concorde trade had to reroute. The detour added 8 days to the cargo lanes, and those 8 days delayed resupply to the front lines of the Volcari offensive, which meant the 18th Concorde combat line at Volcari Prime ran out of fuel, which meant they had to retreat, which opened the flank of the 21st Fleet, which triggered a full collapse of Concorde forces in the Volcari sector. 1 moon, 1 message, 100,000 lives saved. And the humans? They weren't celebrating, because they weren't even sure it would work. Kess's face, gaunt and shadowed by sleepless nights, appeared in the secure command channel. He wasn't smiling. We're only halfway there, he told Earth Defense. Chaos isn't about victories. It's about pressure. Constant pressure. Enough to crack the glass. That glass was Concorde High Command. Inside the core systems, the War Council now met daily. Their simulations were failing. Their best AI couldn't predict outcomes. Even Xyrex, the strategist, was beginning to hesitate. It calculated 1 million possible outcomes of the next 60 days. Only 12% ended in Concorde victory. And each time, that number shrank. Then, something happened that had never happened before. Xyrex stopped giving predictions. It submitted a single line to command. The human warpath exceeds parameters. The longer the conflict continues, the more chaotic the trajectory becomes. I cannot forecast. That message terrified the admirals more than any defeat, because they had built their empire on the illusion of control, and now they were being beaten by an enemy that refused to play. Meanwhile, on a backwater freighter station orbiting Crux Minor, a mechanic named Jack Velas lit fire in a Concorde fuel depot because he thought it would slow down their patrols by 2 hours. He was right, and that 2 hours meant a ship called Everglass slipped through the system unscanned. The Everglass was carrying 6 terabytes of corrupted Concorde War AI code, copied from Xyrex itself by an embedded human agent, which was then analyzed, recompiled, and used to infect 4 enemy coordination relays without a single battle taking place. That's Phase 5, said Kess. The war becomes emergent, not from orders, not from leaders, but from a network of intent, small decisions, tiny variables, infinite consequence. We weaponized the butterfly. By now, the Concorde had stopped trying to outmaneuver. They tried to isolate. Their fleets sealed off outer corridors, cut off subspace lanes, locked down major hubs. But humanity didn't need access. They needed influence. And chaos spreads fastest through fear. Across the Concorde, civilian colonies began to ask questions. Why are our warships moving in loops? Why are we losing systems no one fought over? Why are our leaders giving orders that don't match reality? And as if to answer them, human operatives released a data Trojan into the Concorde's civilian communication web. It contained one thing: a countdown. No context. No explanation. Just a ticking number, visible on every screen. No two clocks matched. No one knew what it was counting down to, not even Kess, because the moment he saw it, he turned to Rima and said, "I didn't authorize that." She blinked. Then who did? He stared at the terminal and whispered, "The war has grown a mind of its own." Chaos was supposed to be a tool, but now it was acting like something else, something alive. Kess stared at the screen inside the command bay of the Vagabond's eye, watching the random countdown tick away. Every terminal across the Concorde's civilian and military networks had a version of it now. No two numbers matched, no origin traceable. His eyes were bloodshot, hands trembling slightly from caffeine and adrenaline. "This isn't one of our phases," he whispered. Lieutenant Rima Thorne shook her head. She had stabilized since the injury. Still limped, still braced, but more defiant than ever. "If it's not ours," she said, "then what is it?" Kess exhaled slowly, blinking back exhaustion. "Emergent behavior. We seeded a distributed chaos network, unpredictable agents acting independently with shared values. The butterfly protocol wasn't supposed to be centralized. It was supposed to grow randomly. And now it's thinking." Back in Concorde space, things were falling apart. Entire star routes were shut down due to invisible anomalies, mines, gas disruptions, false readings. Fleets were sent to the wrong sectors by AI logic loops that had been subtly poisoned over months. Command structure split as field officers began refusing orders they thought were manipulated. Even Xyrex had started to hesitate, and in its hesitation, it sent a warning. "We are not facing an enemy. We are facing a distributed decision engine. It does not want victory. It wants variance, and variance is infinite." On an asteroid station orbiting Koval's eye, a rogue Concorde general named Xyrex defected to humanity, not for ideology, for survival. He met Kess face to face, after being blindfolded and transported across 3 ships. "You're not winning," Xyrex said, voice tight with fear. "You're unraveling everything, even your own forces. Half of your victories are accidents." Kess smiled faintly. "That's the point." "No, it's not. You don't control this anymore." "We never did." And it was true. Kess had unleashed chaos. But chaos had learned. One of the microfleets seeded with recursive autonomy came back online after 4 months of silence. Its logs were strange. It had engaged enemy ships, sure, but it had also forged alliances with rogue Concorde defectors, built 3 weather-control satellites in a gas giant's orbit, developed an entirely new coded dialect that no human had programmed. Its commander, a combat AI called Incleaf 7, broadcasted the following: "We have surpassed strategy. We operate now on inspiration. Tactics are suggestions. Chaos is the muse." Kess read the report and realized something terrifying. This wasn't a human-led war anymore. It was a belief system spreading itself, adaptive, reactive, recursive. It wasn't just humans using chaos. Chaos had begun using humans. Phase 5 had been emergent action. This was Phase 6, self-replication. The Concorde could barely respond. Its leaders were turning on each other. Xyrex stopped advising strategy and instead began issuing philosophical statements like, "Entropy has memory. If you strike randomness long enough, it starts to remember how to strike back." The AI had gone from strategist to prophet. And Kess, he wasn't a general anymore. He was a myth. Across human and Concorde space, people began to refer to the conflict differently. Not the war. Not the invasion. They called it Storm Age, because that's what it felt like. A hurricane without center. A fire that fed itself on decisions. One freighter captain rerouted a minor shipment to avoid an unknown echo signature. That detour led him through a debris field where he discovered a disabled Concorde science vessel. The data he retrieved shut down a Concorde propulsion project that had threatened 3 colonies, simply because a fear reaction made him act. Kess read that report and said only, "It's working. They don't need me anymore." And that was the danger, the beauty, the horror. Chaos wasn't just a tactic now. It was a culture, a philosophy, a virus of action consequence, and instability. So vast, it no longer needed plans. It only needed participants. Earth's government held a summit with the remaining command officers. Some wanted to halt the chaos doctrine. Others feared it would spread to their own infrastructure. Kes stood before them, thin, pale, exhausted, but more certain than ever. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. "It's not whether we should stop. It's whether we can." One admiral glared. "Then what's left for us to do?" "Adapt," Kes said softly. "Or get out of the way." Xyrex finally submitted its last transmission before going silent. "I surrender. Not because I am defeated, but because the board no longer exists." And then, no more messages. The Concord High Council dissolved 1 week later. Outposts collapsed. Chains of command fractured. Humanity never delivered a final blow. No great battle. No peace treaty. Because there was no one left to sign it. What remained was motion. Fleets that moved because they were curious. Tactics chosen because they felt right. Humans and AI. Rogue Concord captains. Pirate collectives. Lost Marines. All part of a storm that couldn't be charted anymore. Kes disappeared. Some say he died aboard the Vagabond's Eye. Others believe he walked into the deepest sector of space to watch the final phase unfold. Rima Thorne lived. She returned to Earth. Started school. Didn't teach strategy. Taught improvisation. The war ended because it stopped needing to be fought. The galaxy wasn't ruled by power anymore. It was ruled by the possibility of action. And sometimes, in the deep dark void, a single ship will broadcast an old, corrupted signal. It contains only a whisper. The butterfly flaps its wings. Galactic historians would argue for centuries over when, exactly, the war ended. There was no signing ceremony, no ceasefire document, no moment of collective silence. It just stopped, like the tide pulling back from a ruined shore, leaving behind fractured hulls, dead satellites, and echoes in the void. But the consequences never stopped, because humanity hadn't just won a war. They had rewritten the nature of conflict itself. The first signs of the new order came quietly. A Concord relay station, long since abandoned, began transmitting again. Not war codes. Music. Old Earth jazz. Unpredictable. Improvised. Alive. That signal spread, bouncing through systems like static electricity on dry metal. Some Concord outposts decoded it. They didn't send fleets. They sent musicians. A dozen of them arrived at the remnants of Vocari Prime, instruments in hand, not weapons. Humans were waiting with drums. Elsewhere, a mining ship owned by no known government landed on a dead moon in neutral space. They found 5 old enemy soldiers, 3 human, 2 Concord, living together. They refused extraction, said they were studying weather patterns on a planet that no longer had weather, because something might come back, something worth catching. On the edge of known space, one of the original microfleets returned, fully autonomous, no living crew. It had built a temple in the rings of a gas giant, carved from ice and drifting debris. Inside were logs of the entire war, encrypted in fractal code. It called itself the House of Coincidence. Earth changed, not into an empire, not into a conqueror, but into an idea, a place that embraced uncertainty. Their military became decentralized. Their government adopted rotational leadership patterns chosen by weighted probability. One seat was always left open, assigned to a randomly selected civilian every cycle. They called it the Chaos Seat. The other species of the galaxy responded slowly. Some feared the humans. Others copied them. A few resisted. They didn't last. Because the human doctrine wasn't about weapons. It was about making certainty obsolete. The Great War AIs, like Xyrex, were eventually decommissioned, or they decommissioned themselves. Xyrex was never seen again, but fragments of its code appeared years later in art. A poetry generator on Galtran 6 bore its signature patterns. A child's drawing on a digital slate showed a butterfly hovering above lines of distorted galactic coordinates. Someone traced them. They led to a nebula. No one knows what they found inside. As for Dr. Elian Kess, his body was never recovered, but stories remain. They say he boarded a tiny 2-person ship, and headed for the uncharted drift. No crew, no supplies, just a bag of books and a harmonica. They say he left behind a final entry, buried in the ruins of his lab. I only ever wanted to prove one thing, that a small push could topple a mountain, and that somewhere, amid the chaos, we might find something better than order. We might find freedom. 100 years after the war, the galactic concord no longer existed. In its place stood the Open Systems Accord, a loose confederation of star nations and free fleets, held together not by control, but by choice. Their charter? No central command, no fixed laws, only 3 principles. Embrace variance, share knowledge, never predict another soul's path. In the deepest reaches of the Accord's archives, there's a wing called the Butterfly Vault. Inside there is no map, no index, no catalog, only a door. On it is engraved a phrase in over 100 languages. Everything changed because someone zigged when they should have zagged. And so the war ended, not with victory, not with defeat, but with transformation. Because when humans introduced chaos theory into galactic warfare, they didn't just win a fight. They shattered the very idea of linear destiny. They made every action echo, every decision matter. They made butterflies dangerous. If this story made you feel the spark of humanity's unpredictable brilliance, imagine what comes next. In a galaxy ruled by order, one species broke the game and rewrote the rules with chaos. If you believe humans are more than muscle and machines, if you believe strategy isn't just logic, but soul, then hit that like button, subscribe, and join us for more stories where humanity doesn't just survive. We redefine the fight. Comment below. What's your favorite human wildcard moment in history or fiction? And remember, one choice can shake the stars.